There's a series that I organized with 4 other authors called "All These People Are Going to Die," and Ruth Anna Evans made a cover with 5 characters on it. So on each book cover, one character is highlighted and the rest are blurred. And that character is the character for that particular book. Each author got one character from the picture. And we had to write a Halloween-themed story where that character had to die. My book is book 5 of the series, and it's called The Carver. Here's chapter 1, Sean. Fall 2022, North Carolina. Sean wiped his 2 wet strands of hair from his face, pushed them back against his bald head, spiky with fresh stubble, and tugged his red wagon behind him full of pumpkins. Someone ran out of a nearby building. Shielding themselves from the rain, they hurried over to him. "Are you mad, man?" the old man asked when they reached him, forcing him and his wagon to stop short. Sean shook his head. He was thin and wiry, but strong as an ox, as he'd spent much of his youth on a farm just like this one. No, sir. Not mad. I'm here for the pumpkin carving contest." The farmer looked at him like he was definitely mad. "Son, there ain't no damn pumpkin carving contest. Even if it weren't storming like hell, there ain't been no contest since COVID. Maybe next year it'll start up again. Things is just beginning to get back to normal and whatnot. Sorry, bud." "I was going to do a whole scene with kids trick-or-treating at a house. It would have won," Sean said, looking back at his uncarved pumpkins with sadness glimmering in his brown eyes. "I'm sure it would have. Go on and call yourself the winner. Just get yourself out of the rain." "Yes, sir. Sorry to bother you," Sean said. He nodded his bald head and turned around, dragging his wagon back the way he'd come. The farmer watched him go and shook his head. A woman ran out of the building to stand beside him. "I don't think that boy drove," she said. "He came walking from the road with that wagon. He's a strange one." The farmer sighed. "Well, shit, Amanda. I can't just let him walk miles in this storm towing a wagon. I'm going to get the truck fired up." "You're a good man, Chris." She stood on her tippy toes to kiss his stubbled cheek. Then she pulled her coat over her head to shield herself from the rain and hurried back to the building. Sean was heading down the road, his back bent and his head down, his wagon trailing behind, when a rusted blue pickup truck pulled up beside him. Chris leaned over and said, "Son, how far you going? We can put your whole wagon in the truck and I'll take you. No reason for you to walk in this weather." Sean nodded and started loading his wagon and pumpkins into the bed of the truck. He walked around to the driver's side window and looked at Chris, his face scrunched with worry. "I'm afraid they'll roll out and get smashed." Chris sighed, but he put the truck in park and got out. He walked around to the back and opened a box, pulling some bungee cords out. "Where are you headed anyway?" he asked, as he fixed the wagon in place with the cords. He tugged them to make sure they were tight and then pulled a tarp over the wagon and the pumpkins it contained. "I gotta go to the other carving contest. I think it's in Hickory," Sean said. Chris looked at the man like he was crazy again, but he held his tongue and got back in the truck. When Sean joined him, he said, "You know how far that is from where you are? You were going to walk?" "Yes, sir. I don't drive," Sean said. "I just carve." "Well, what did you do last year or the year before when everything was shut down?" Chris asked as he put the truck in gear and drove off. "I still carved. Just no one saw them is all. Well, my sister did, but she's biased." He laughed heartily. Chris sighed. "Well, son, you may have to do the same again this year, 'cause I ain't driving you all the way to Hickory. You live around here, I'll take you home." Sean brushed his wet bangs back over his bald head. "I don't live nowheres anymore, sir. Sis went off to college, Mom and Pop died, and some men took the farm, and I didn't have nothing else. I'd just go." "Jesus, boy, Chris said with a sigh. Go where? Sean shrugged. Wherever. I just go where the pumpkins are. Chris frowned. You know, most of them competitions will supply the pumpkins, son. Sean smiled then. His teeth were yellow and black, what ones remained. I know, but I like to bring my own because I find the best ones. I make sure. I plan what I want to do, and then I go through the patches and I find the perfect ones. Chris licked his lips, unsure of how to respond. Is there somewhere I can take you, son? Anywhere you can go, at least until this storm lets up? I just need somewhere I can carve, where my pumpkins will be okay. Any idea where that might be? I'll bet you anything that contest in Hickory ain't happening neither. Sean grabbed one of the 2 pieces of hair he had and twirled it nervously between his fingers. There's got to be somewhere. It's all I've got. I appreciate you being nice to me and all, but I have to carve. I already picked out the perfect pumpkins. You saw them. They're perfect. Chris took a deep breath and adjusted the ball cap on his head. What about your mom and dad's farm? Maybe you can just get drive there and carve your pumpkins to your heart's content. Sean shook his head. His one loose bang flopped around like a tentacle. No, sir. I can't do that. The new folks don't want me there. They done run me off shooting guns and whatnot. Blasted my pumpkins to bits. Chris glanced over as a darkness came upon Sean's bony face. He quickly looked back at the road, though, afraid of making a mistake in the hard rain. There's got to be somewhere you can go. To the carving contest. Chris squeezed the steering wheel in an attempt to reel in his frustration. Boy, I keep telling you there ain't no carving contest. You're going to have to just carve on your own this year. Sean turned and glared at him, eyes burning with fire. Now you sound like Mom and Pop. They were always saying. He took a deep breath and started screaming in what had to be his best impression of his parents' voices. You gotta do something with your life, Sean. You need to quit with those goddamn pumpkins. Go find yourself a girl or something. Be a man. Be a human, for fuck's sake. Be anything other than whatever the fuck you are. Chris kept glancing between Sean and the wet road. The irate man was making him nervous. Well, that sounds terrible. They shouldn't be so mean. I'm sorry. Sean gave a shy smile. Thank you, he said meekly. They were sorry, too. They told me so a whole bunch when they died. Chris glanced over at him again for a moment, lost control of the truck. The wheels screeched and it swerved back and forth. Sean screamed, My pumpkins! Stop! It's the rain, I'm trying, Chris said. When he got the truck righted, his hands were trembling. He drove very slowly. I'm just going to take you back to our farm, he said. You can carve your pumpkins there. But you already said I couldn't. You need to stop so I can make sure they're okay. If they're not, I'm sure you can find one in our patch. It'll be all right. We just need to get out of this rain, all right? Stop the truck. Son, if I stop this truck and you get out, I'm going to leave you out. The weather is awful. My wife is waiting for me. Just let me check my pumpkins and we can go. Hell, I'll just walk like I was when you came and got me. Just let me get my pumpkins. All right, Chris said. He started to pull over towards the side of the road. He licked his lips, nervous, tingling. He knew the bungee was tight, but he had swerved a lot. He wasn't sure what the man would do if the pumpkins were damaged. He threw the truck into park and said, Go on, then. Don't go nowhere now, Sean said, climbing out of the truck. Chris just nodded. The rain was coming down hard. It sounded like a million tiny fists beating on the middle of the truck. Chris watched nervously in the rearview mirror while Sean walked around to the back of the truck. His vision was obscured when the tarp was lifted and he cursed quietly. He stuck his head out the window and looked back, but still couldn't see. His fearful eyes returned to the mirror as the tarp fell away. He saw Sean's face then. It was lit by fury. They're ruined, he snapped. I spent days finding the perfect ones and you broke them. Chris swallowed a lump in his throat. He wanted to apologize, to say it was an accident, but he didn't think the man would listen to reason. He said it anyway as he threw the truck back into drive and surged away. Sean was standing in the road, his wet clothes on his thin frame flapping in the rain like a flagpole. "My wagon," he screamed. "You've got my wagon!" Chris was toweling off when Amanda came into the room. "Where'd you end up taking that poor boy?" "He had a farm not far from here, his parents' place," Chris said, only half lying. "I shouldn't have taken him anywhere, Amanda. It was a mistake. I don't think that boy is right in the head. His hair and manners sure was strange, but he seemed harmless to me," she said, taking his towel from him. "Boy just wanted to carve pumpkins." "Yeah," was all Chris could say back. "We still got that bourbon around? The good stuff?" Amanda had taken the towel to the bathroom, but she returned quickly. She looked at him with concern. "If you're looking for the bourbon, that boy really shook you. You want to tell me about it?" "I'll tell you about it," another voice said. They both turned to look. Sean was standing just inside the front door, the rain dripping off his saturated clothes with a rhythmic tapping. Amanda gasped at the sight of the strange man. He looked even thinner in the sopping wet clothes. His 2 bangs were now plastered to his head like strikes of lightning. "He smashed my pumpkins, left me out there, and drove away with my wagon." Amanda couldn't believe that Chris would do such a thing. She looked up at him. "Chris?" Chris's attention was on Sean, though. "How did you say your parents died again?" "I never did say." Chris was staring at the jagged pumpkin carving knife in the man's bony, dripping hand. He imagined it dripping with something other than rain, crimson drops pelting the floor. "How did they die, son?" "Same way as the people who took over the farm," Sean said, stepping forward. "All I want to do is make my art, but some folks don't understand." "Amanda, get the gun," Chris said without taking his eyes off the man before him. "What happens to people that ain't understand, boy?" Sean's mouth stretched into a wide smile, putting his stained and broken teeth on display. He raised his arms out at his sides, Chris's gaze following the blade in his right hand. "They become art." The crazy man actually sounded genuinely happy. There was definitely something off about him. Chris didn't ask for further clarification. He didn't feel like he needed it. "Well, I've still got your wagon, son. How about you make good on my offer and carve here? I'll help you pick out some new pumpkins. We got plenty to choose from." Sean looked like a child when he sheepishly shook his head. "It's okay," he said quietly. "I don't need 'em no more." Chris moved, but Sean moved faster. When Amanda came running back holding a rifle as old as they were, she gasped and immediately dropped it. Chris was on his knees, holding his throat. Blood was gushing between his fingers onto the carpet. His eyes were wide with horror as he tried to hold his life inside him. Amanda ran over to him in a panic. Chris tried to say something, but just choked and coughed. Blood came from his mouth and sprayed her face. He lifted a weak hand and pointed behind her. When she turned to look, Sean was there, holding the rifle like a baseball bat. He swung for a home run and smashed her in the side of the head. Amanda opened her eyes, and she could still barely see. Her head was pounding. She grabbed it and felt sticky on her hand. She moaned and looked around for Chris, her poor, wonderful Chris. Someone was there in the room with her. She strained to sit up and realized she could only go so far. Her arms and legs were bound to the bed. She raised her head as far as it would go and looked over towards the door. Sean was standing there. He was wearing an apron and long, thick gloves that went past his elbows. "I ain't gonna rape you or nothing," he said to her. "Mom and Pop always wanted me to get with a girl, but I don't really like that stuff. I tried it one time and it was just strange. I just like carving." Amanda tried to hold back her tears. "Where's Chris?" The young man lit up with excitement. "Oh, you just gotta see him. You're gonna love it, Miss Amanda. You'll see." "Okay, take me to him," she said. Sean chuckled. "Oh, I can't do that. You'll try to run away, and I have a great idea for yours." "For my what?" Sean turned and went to the door. "Wait, for my what? For my what?" He walked out and closed it behind him. Then she let the tears come. Amanda wasn't sure how long she had been alone, but it felt like forever. Then the door opened. She would have jumped if she had been able to, but the ropes held her firmly. She knew it had to be him again. Amanda turned her head towards the door to look, and what she saw made her start screaming, and she couldn't stop. Her husband was standing before her on a dolly being pushed by Sean, or at least what was left of her husband. He'd been stripped naked. His arms and legs had been removed. His torso had been hollowed out and carved into a wicked smiling face. Behind the open eyes, in his chest cavity, a candlelight flickered within his rib cage. His head was gone, and his neck had been shaved into a curved half-moon shape to resemble a pumpkin stem. Wait, Sean said. Stop yelling, you haven't seen the best part yet. Those words frightened Amanda so much that her scream cut off abruptly. She stared at the horrifying sculpture that had once been her husband. She only knew by the scar on his chest above his left nipple, which now looked like an eyebrow to a horrifying hollow eye of a flickering orange light. What more could this monster possibly do to him? You ready? Sean asked giddily. Amanda just stared forward, unable to find words. He giggled then, and tugged the handcrafted neck stem upwards. When it lifted away from the carved torso, there was Chris's mostly fleshless skull attached to the underside of it, hidden in his savaged body. Pretty scary, huh? Amanda found her voice again and resumed screaming. This time she had no plans of stopping. I can do more than faces, he said as she screamed. I'm actually really good. I think I'm going to do a mermaid with you. Amanda just kept screaming. Sean laughed. All right, I'll be back. I'm going to go put this one on the porch, and then you and I can get started. He opened the door, tipped the dolly, and went out, taking the Chris pumpkin with him. Behind him, Amanda thrashed against her binds. She was wild, frantic, and as good as dead. She was art.